We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Aleph in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 10a. And the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the Mishnah Menachos, which says a person says, I'm going to donate a carbon mincha of barley. So the Tana Kama holds he has to bring a carbon mincha of wheat. There's no such thing as a carbon mincha of barley in that scenario, and therefore we understand that he is obligated to bring a carbon mincha, a proper carbon mincha that comes from wheat. And Chizkiah said, why did the Mishnah, or why did the Tana Kama say specifically a case where the person says he wants to bring a carbon mincha of barley? Why not say an even bigger chiddush, that if the person says I want to bring a carbon mincha of lentils, and there's absolutely no such thing as a carbon mincha of lentils. When it comes to a carbon mincha of barley, there are some carbon minchas that are brought from barley. You can have a carbon mincha from a minchas sota. A sota brings a carbon mincha from barley. You can have the minchas omer from barley. So it should have said an even greater chiddush. Even when the person says I'm going to bring a carbon mincha from lentils, which never is brought as a carbon mincha, even there the Tana Kama says that the person has to bring a carbon mincha from wheat, and therefore Chizkiah inferred from the Mishnah that it wouldn't be true. In a situation of lentils, since lentils is not associated with carbon mincha at all, the person would actually not be obligated in a carbon mincha at all, even according to the Tana Kama. And Rabbi Yochanan is now arguing back to Chizkiah and saying the diak that you're making in the Mishnah is not accurate, because it could be on the contrary, it could be the other way around. The Mishnah didn't mention lentils, because by lentils, for sure the Tana Kama would say in that case that the person is obligated to bring a carbon mincha from wheat, because what we say is the person is trying to retract by saying lentils. That's his way of saying he doesn't actually want to bring the carbon mincha that he just promised, and he's not able to retract. We take the first part of what he says seriously, and we say that he has to bring the carbon mincha. But it could be that by barley you would have said otherwise, because it could be that by barley it wasn't really a retraction. It could be the person was saying, if I can sanctify a carbon mincha made of barley, just like we find by the minchas omer, oka minchas sota, or as we find by the mincha of the sota, so tikdosh, so then I want it to be sanctified, and ilolo, and if not, I don't want it to be sanctified, and then maybe we'll say that it won't take effect. The Tana Kama would not obligate the person to bring a carbon mincha, and kamash malon. So then the Mishnah is teaching us the ma'asim and achitim, that even in the case of the barley, he has to bring from wheat, and so therefore Rabbi Yochanan is saying to Chizkiah, the diuk that you're making, the fact that adoshim was not mentioned in the Mishnah, does not necessarily mean that the halacha would be different by adoshim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Amar, let's say a person says, Amra parazu, this cow said, Hareini Nazira, I'm a Nazir, imomedesani, if I stand up. Or Omer Hadelas Hazeh, this door says, Hareini Nazira, I am a Nazir, im niftachani, if I open. So Beis Shammai Omrim Nazir, Beis Shammai say that in that case, the person is a Nazir. Ubeis Hillel Omrim Eino Nazir, and Beis Hillel say the person is not a Nazir. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda says, Af Kisha Amru Beis Shammai, even when Beis Shammai said that, Lo Omrim Ela Ba'omer Harei Parazu Alai Karbon im Omedesi. Beis Shammai is only saying that if the person says this para to me is a carbon, meaning he's prohibiting the para to himself as a neder. If the para stands up, so then the para will be forbidden. In other words, Beis Shammai did not go so far as to say that the person is a nazir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Shammai simply said in the case of a neder, the neder will take effect if a person makes this kind of condition. And the Gemara says, Para mika mishtoi, is it possible for a cow to speak? Amar Rami Bar Chama, so Rami Bar Chama says, he explains the Mishnah means as follows. Hacha b'may askin, and here the case is as follows. Kigon sha'isa para revutza lefanav. There's a cow that's crouching in front of him. V'yamar, and he says, Kisvura parazu eina omedes. This cow thinks that it's not going to stand up. In other words, the person is trying to get the cow to stand, and the cow is not standing up. And then the person says, Hareini nazir mi besara im amda me'eleha. He says, I'm a nazir from its flesh if it stands up on its own. V'amda me'eleha. And then the cow, it stands up on its own. V'halchu Beis Shammai l'shitasan u'Beis Hillel l'shitasan. Beis Shammai, they're following their opinion in the previous Mishnah, and Beis Hillel is following their opinion in the previous Mishnah. And it goes as follows. Beis Shammai da'amri min ha'grogros min ha'devela have a nazir. By Beis Shammai, they said earlier that if a person says, I'm a nazir min ha'grogros min ha'devela, so the end part of their statement really is meaningless in terms of naziris. So again, have a nazir. Beis Shammai said in that case, the person nevertheless is a nazir. We say we take the first part of the statement seriously, and the person is a nazir. Hachanami here also. Ki amar mi besara have a nazir. When the person says mi besara, so we're going to say that the person made the phrase hareini nazir, and the person is going to be a nazir regardless of the end of the person's statement. Beis Hillel omrim, and Beis Hillel saying, no, lo have a nazir, the person is not a nazir in this case, because again, the end of the statement, when the person says mi besara, from the cow's flesh, he's taking this neder, so that's not a standard naziris. Naziris is from grape products, from wine products, and therefore in this situation, the person will not be a nazir. But the Gemara continues, V'amru Beis Shammai chada zimna. But didn't Beis Shammai already say this? Why do Beis Shammai have to repeat the same basic halacha in this Mishnah that they said in the last Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, Amar Rava says, Tarti tlos. They say 2 or 3 times. Sometimes you'll have Mishnayos that say 2 or 3 times the same basic case. V'chein tani Rebbe Chia, and similarly Rebbe Chia taught, Tarti tlos, it's learned 2 or 3 times. V'chein Amar Reb Oshia, Tarti tlos. And similarly Reb Oshia says, Tarti tlos, it's learned 2 or 3 times. And the Gemara explains why we need all of these cases. We need all of these cases for the following reason. The Yitmar Baha Grogrus Udevela, that if we only had the case of Grogrus and Devela, so then we would say, Hasam hu the Amri Beis Shammai, there Beis Shammai say, when the person says Hareini Nazir, but then he adds in from the Grogrus and from the Devela, so there Beis Shammai say Have Nazir. There Beis Shammai say the person is a Nazir, Misham de Michlefan Ba Novim, because those are the kinds of things, Grogrus and Devela, dried figs, can be confused with grapes, and therefore we say the person is a Nazir. Aval Basar Ba Novim Lo Michlef, but when it comes to meat and grapes, those are not things that are mixed up. V'yitmar basar, and if we only had the case of basar, hachu damri Beis Shammai have a nazir over here. By basar, maybe only there by basar Beis Shammai say the person is a nazir, because bebisra v'chamra, because meat and wine are things that are generally coupled together. Aval grogros devela lo, but when it comes to the dried figs, when it comes to the cake of dried figs, those are not generally together with wine, and therefore maybe Beis Shammai would not have said the person is a nazir. So kamash malon, so that's why we have that case to say the person is a nazir in that case as well. And the Gemara continues, V'yitmar hani tarti, and if we only had those 2 cases, meaning the cases of the meat and the cases of the grogros and devela, so hani hu deklamri Beis Shammai, so maybe only over there Beis Shammai say that the person is a nazir. Avol delis, but let's say by a door which has nothing to do with naziras, so ema modu lehu leBeis Hillel, I might think they admit to Beis Hillel that the person is not a nazir. V'itana delis, and if it only taught the case of delis, b'ha ka'amri Beis Hillel, so maybe in that case Beis Hillel say the person is not a nazir. Avol but maybe in the other 2 cases, the case of the basar and the case of the grogros and devela, they would admit to Beis Shammai that the person is a nazir. Kamash malantalo, so that's what it teaches us. They do not admit in that scenario. That's why we have all of these cases. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Mikatani imamda meilel. Does it say in our Mishnah that the cow is standing up on its own? Rava is questioning Rami Bar Chama's explanation of the Mishnah, because Rava says we don't find anything in the Mishnah that speaks about the fact that the cow is standing up on its own. Elamar Rava, rather, Rava says the explanation of the Mishnah is as follows. Kagon shahaisa para ravutza lefanav. Again, the cow is crouching in front of him. V'yamar, and he says, Harei alai korban. This is upon me as a korban. But the Gemara says, according to this explanation, Bishlama para bas karban. I understand the case of para, at least a cow is something that can be brought as a karban. Eladelas bas karban. Can you even say a door is brought as a karban? So that can't possibly be the explanation of the Mishnah. Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Kagon shaisa para ravutza lefanav. The case is there's a cow that's crouching in front of him. And Rashi over here says, Umikatani mamda meila. Does it say anything about the cow standing up on its own? Imomedes stam kamer just says if it stands up. Bein meila, bein al yidei acherim. It's talking about whether it stands up on its own or whether other people cause it to stand up. Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Kagon shaisa par ravutza lefanav v'yomar harei alai korban. The case is again the cow is crouching in front of him. He says harei alai korban. Kilomar shaisa par ravutza lefanav. What's happening is the cow is crouching in front of him. V'yomar kisvura par azu she'eno medes misakeves anikan shelo emad liolam va'afilu al yidei adam. The cow is thinking to itself, it's never going to stand up, not on its own, not through somebody else. V'yomar, and the person says harei alai korban. Kilomar, what it means is as follows: shehezer atzmo mimena. He separates himself from the cow, im lo yamiden, if it doesn't stand, v'yamda me'eleh, and then it stands up. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Amud Beis.